Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is Harvey. I'm 36 years old, an obscure writer living in a cramped apartment in a small town somewhere in the vast expanse of America. Calling myself a writer sounds grandiose. Almost like a lie I keep telling myself to make the struggle seem noble. But in reality, I'm just a gaunt man hunched over an old laptop, painstakingly crafting every sentence, every word, with the faint hope that one day maybe, just maybe my work will be published. For over a decade, I've written dozens of manuscripts. I sent them out to agents, publishers, contests. All came back with rejection slips, some cold and curt, others sympathetic, but no less final. I tucked each one away in a dusty drawer, the place where old dreams go to rest. People sometimes call me an undiscovered author, as if that's a badge of honor. But I don't see it that way. I see myself as a dreamer trapped in a reality filled with mounting bills and the cries of young children. I have 3 kids. Erica, 8 years old, with soft brown hair and bright, hopeful eyes. She's the little mother, always watching over her brothers like she's older than she is. Then there's Logan, 5, with a goofy smile and tiny hands that always seem to be clutching the hem of my shirt like he's afraid I'll disappear too. And Nolan, the youngest, just 3, always giggling, always seeking affection like it's the only thing keeping him alive. My children are my entire world. But they're also a burden I never could have imagined when I took on the responsibility of being a single father. Camille, their mother, left 2 years ago, said I was too poor, that I was incapable of supporting a family, that I was a failure unworthy of her dreams. I still remember that final evening. She stood in the kitchen with her coat on, zipping up the suitcase while I held Nolan in my arms. "You're really doing this?" I asked. My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. She didn't look at me. "I can't live like this, Harvey. I just can't. You're drowning and taking us with you." "I'm trying," I whispered, but she was already at the door. "You're not enough," she said quietly, as if saying it softly would hurt less. Then she was gone. Nolan was just learning to toddle back then. I held him while he screamed, the wail cutting into my ears like glass. Erica tugged at my sleeve, her eyes wide and afraid. "Where's mommy going?" she asked. She needs some time." I lied. Logan started crying too. "I don't want her to go." Nobody did. Since that night, I've been father, mother, cook, storyteller. The one who works day and night just to pay rent and buy milk. Our apartment, 2 worn-out bedrooms with yellowed walls, is all we have. It's not much, but it's home. Every morning, I wake before the sun. I brew a weak cup of coffee, more water than strength. I quietly prepare breakfast, just a few slices of toast and peanut butter. I wake Erica, Logan, and Nolan, help them dress, and rush them to school and preschool, backpacks bouncing as we run for the bus. Then I return to the empty apartment. I open my laptop and I start typing. But writing doesn't feed 3 children. So I take whatever freelance work I can scrounge up, writing ads, editing academic texts, even translating medical documents I barely understand. By day, I'm a hired pen. By night, I'm an anonymous author still chasing a shadow of a dream. And amidst all that, I still have to be dad. The one who comforts them when they're sick. The one who mends Erica's dress when it tears. The one who reads bedtime stories even when my eyes are red with exhaustion. My family, they've never really understood me. My parents live in Florida now, in a fancy beachside condo with sunlight that streams through floor-to-ceiling windows. They call a few times a year. The conversations are always short, always distant. "How are the kids?" my mother asks, her voice always distracted. "They're good," I say, and leave it at that. "Still writing those books?" my father chuckles. "Still trying," I mutter. There's a pause, then the familiar advice wrapped in judgment. "You should have chosen a practical career, like accounting or engineering." They haven't visited since Camille left. Not once. When I asked them just once if they could watch the kids for a weekend, so I could maybe breathe for a day, maybe get some work done, or just lie still without a child needing something, they said they had plans. A yacht trip, a golf tournament, always something, always somewhere else. I used to hope they'd change. That maybe, one day, they'd see how hard I've tried to keep this family from falling apart. That they'd look at me and see not a failure, not a disappointment, but a man who's still standing despite being abandoned, broke, and exhausted. But all they ever see is Harvey, the son, who couldn't make money. Not the father who's desperately clinging to his last shred of hope. Every time I watch my 3 children sleeping soundly in their beds, my heart feels impossibly heavy. I stare at them in the dark, listen to the soft, steady rhythm of their breathing, and I think, if only I could give them more. A spacious house, Hot meals that didn't come from cans or discounted shelves. Weekend trips like the ones they see on TV, the beach, a zoo, something bright and warm and full of life. But all I can do is keep going. Day by day, hour by hour. Working, writing, cooking, cleaning, holding my kids close when night falls. I know I'm living on the edge. Not just financially, but emotionally. On the brink of something I don't even want to name. There are nights, after the kids are asleep and the dishes are done, when I sit in front of my laptop, and the tears just come. Not because of the stories I'm trying to write, but because I feel so helpless. So worn. No matter how hard I try, I'm still not good enough. Not earning enough. Not strong enough to keep everything from crumbling. But then I wipe the tears away, close the laptop, and tell myself, I can't give up. I can't let Erica, Logan, and Nolan see me broken. They need me. And I need them. But no matter how many times I told myself I wouldn't break, fate kept testing us. Ruthlessly. It was a freezing morning. The kind where the cold cuts through your jacket like it's not even there. Erica had been coughing during the night, but I figured it was just a winter bug. Kids get sick all the time. Nothing new. She even tried to act normal at breakfast, picking at her toast and smiling faintly at Logan's jokes. But by noon, her cough had grown violent, deep, and hacking, the kind that makes your chest ache just to hear it. I laid a hand on her forehead, burning. Her face was pale, lips dry and cracked. She curled up in bed and looked at me with those tired eyes that barely stayed open. Daddy, she whispered, I feel really bad. My stomach dropped. I called Dr. Jennings, the local GP we sometimes saw when I could afford it. After I explained the symptoms, he didn't hesitate. You need to take her to the hospital. Immediately. My hands shook as I hung up. I rushed around the apartment, packing a small bag, just the basics, a change of clothes, a bottle of water, some fever medicine I wasn't sure would help. Logan and Nolan clung to my legs, their eyes wide. What's wrong with Erica, Daddy? Logan asked. Is she going to be okay? Nolan added, voice trembling. I don't know. I said before I could stop myself. Then quickly corrected, she's just really sick. We have to go now, okay? Get your jackets. They obeyed without another word, the fear written all over their little faces. I scooped Erica into my arms. She barely stirred. Her breath was shallow, and her skin felt too warm, too fragile. The drive to the hospital was only 10 minutes, but it felt endless. I gripped the wheel with one hand, Erica's cold fingers in my other. I kept whispering, it's okay, sweetheart. We're almost there. Just hang on. In the rearview mirror, Logan and Nolan sat pressed against each other, silent for once, staring at their sister. When we reached the hospital, everything happened fast. A nurse rushed forward, took Erica from my arms, and wheeled her toward the ER. I followed, but another nurse stopped me at the double doors. Wait here, she said gently. I stood there helpless, clutching Logan and Nolan's hands as they leaned into me, scared and confused. Another nurse approached, clipboard in hand. Can you tell me about Erica's medical history? She asked. I opened my mouth, but the words tangled in my throat. She's 8. She's had ear infections before. And strep? Maybe twice. I could barely remember anything clearly. No allergies. No medications. Except maybe that time when. I paused. My breath caught. My mind felt blank. My chest tightened. I stammered through my answers, barely able to breathe. Finally, the doctor emerged from Erica's room. His face was grave, too grave, and the second I saw it, my stomach twisted. He pulled me aside, lowered his voice, and said, your daughter has severe anemia. We need to run immediate in-depth tests. There's a possibility it could be a serious blood disorder. My mouth went dry. What kind of disorder? He hesitated before speaking the word that would hollow out the inside of my chest. Possibly leukemia. Leukemia. The word crashed through me like a sledgehammer. Cancer. My legs felt weak, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled to Camille's number, pressed dial, and pressed the phone to my ear, trying to keep my voice steady. She answered. Harvey, she's in the hospital, I said. Erica, the doctors say she has a serious blood condition. They're running tests, it could be leukemia. I need help. I can't manage Logan and Nolan and be here for her at the same time. I need you to come. There was a pause. Then her voice flat, distant, cold. Harvey, you know I've started a new life. I can't just drop everything and come back. You'll have to figure it out. But Camille, she's our daughter. I tried to get the words out, but it was too late. The call ended with a long beep. I just stood there, frozen, holding the phone to my ear as if I could will her voice back. My heart was pounding. I tried my parents next. A desperate, stupid hope. My mother answered. Mom, it's Erica. She's sick. Really sick. The doctors think it might be cancer. I need help with the boys. Oh, Harvey, she said, we're in Europe. A river cruise through Germany. We booked it months ago. You understand, right? We can't just leave now. My father chimed in from the background. Tell him to stay strong. They hung up. I stood in the hallway, phone still in hand, head in my palms, as the world began collapsing in around me. Erica was in a hospital bed. Logan and Nolan were tugging at my sleeves, asking questions I couldn't answer. And I had no one. Not a single soul. I took the boys to a small waiting room just outside the treatment area. There were a few battered toys on a low table, plastic dinosaurs, and a half-broken puzzle. Logan sat down and began pushing a toy car across the floor. Nolan curled into my side. I sank into a plastic chair. My back ached. I pulled my laptop out of my bag and opened the freelance job I'd taken, a blog rewrite for a dental office. Something that would maybe cover groceries for the week if I finished it on time. But my eyes kept darting to the hallway. Every time a nurse came out of Erica's room, my chest clenched. That evening, Erica stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dim and distant, but she found me. "Daddy," she whispered, barely audible. "I'm so tired." I leaned in close, cupped her face gently with my palm. "I know, my love," I whispered back. "You're doing great. Daddy's right here. I'm not going anywhere." Logan had crawled up onto the chair beside me, and Nolan sat in my lap, both of them slowly dozing off. I reached over and pulled my jacket from my bag, draping it across their small, sleeping forms. Then I turned back to Erica, took her hand, and held it like it was made of glass. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by her bed, watching the monitor blink, listening to the quiet whir of the breathing machine. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed faintly, casting everything in a sterile glow. The loneliness seeped into every part of me, every muscle, every vein. By morning, the doctor confirmed it. Erica would need to stay in the hospital for long-term treatment. More tests, more procedures. They'd need to confirm the diagnosis, begin planning. I stood there in his office, nodding numbly, my arms around Logan and Nolan, who clung to me as if they could sense something big was happening. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave them at home alone. I couldn't leave Erica in this hospital without someone by her side. So I begged the hospital, literally begged them to let the boys stay with me. I knew it wasn't allowed. I knew it was against regulations. But I had no choice. No childcare, no backup, no support system. Just us. They made an exception. So we squeezed into that small, sterile hospital room. Erica lay pale and quiet in the bed, tubes in her arm. Logan and Nolan played on the floor with toy cars someone from the staff had found. The meals were cold deli sandwiches, boxed orange juice. Every second I watched them, terrified something else might go wrong. Those days blurred together. Every hour was heavy. I was exhausted. But I had no other choice. Each morning, I woke up from the hard plastic chair by Erica's bed. My back aching, neck stiff, eyes burning from the lack of sleep. I'd rub my face, stretch out the knots in my shoulders, then gently lean over and whisper to Logan and Nolan, sleeping on a spare blanket near the corner. "Wake up, guys. Time to get ready for school." They'd blink up at me, groggy, and I'd rush them to school. As they walked into their classrooms, each morning Logan with his crayon-marked backpack, Nolan with his tiny shoes always coming untied, I waved and forced a smile until the last bell rang. Then I turned on my heel and hurried back to the hospital, my heart already pounding with worry. Erica would be there, lying still in her bed, her face pale as the sheets, lips dry and cracked. I'd pull a chair close and take her hand gently in mine, feeling how cold and fragile it had become. "Daddy's here," I'd whisper, brushing the hair from her forehead. "You don't have to be scared, my love. I'm right here." She'd nod weakly, her eyes heavy but holding on to me. That look, half pain, half trust, it never left me. During the day, I split myself in two. One half sat by Erica's side, holding her hand, talking softly to her when she stirred. The other half hunched over my ancient laptop, plugged into the only wall outlet in the room that still worked, trying to finish editing a company brochure or ghostwriting a blog about retirement savings. The words came slowly, the mind behind them slower. But I had to keep earning, no matter how little it brought in. By noon, I'd run down to the hospital cafeteria for a sandwich that tasted like cardboard and a cup of watery coffee. I'd sit at the corner table, phone in hand, making a to-do list in my head while checking the time constantly. The boys needed to be picked up. I couldn't be late. When the clock struck 3, I closed the laptop, packed up my things, and left Erica with the nurses. Every time I stepped away, it felt like ripping off a piece of myself. The drive to the school was quiet. My body ached with fatigue, but when I saw Logan and Nolan waiting by the curb, their eyes lighting up, I smiled. I had to. They'd pile into the back seat, their voices rising with stories about their day. Logan would talk about spelling tests or how he beat Daniel in a race. Nolan would giggle and babble, clutching his paper dinosaur. "Daddy, did you know Mrs. Collins has a hamster?" Logan would ask, bouncing in his seat. "No, I didn't. What's its name?" "Mr. Nibbles," he'd shout, laughing. But even as they talked, I could see it in their eyes, that cloud of worry, that silence whenever Erica's name came up. In the evenings, I brought them back to the hospital. We walked the familiar halls, past the same beeping machines, and stepped back into Erica's room. Logan always climbed up on the bed carefully, mindful of the wires. He'd show her a new drawing, superheroes with capes and big smiles. "Look, Erica, I made this for you." "That's you," he said once, pointing at a girl flying with a bright yellow cape. "You're Super Erica." Erica had smiled, faint but real. "Thanks, Logan. She's strong." Nolan would sit on the floor, babbling to himself and his toy dinosaur. "Roar, Daddy. He says he's not scared of anything. Even big hospitals." I checked in with the nurses. "Has her fever gone down? Is she eating anything?" Then turned back to my laptop. I'd type a few lines, delete them, try again. There was always a deadline looming, another invoice unpaid. Day after day passed in that tight, suffocating cycle. Every hour stretched thin. I was drained. Some nights I fell asleep sitting upright in the hospital chair. My neck would snap forward, and I'd jolt awake to Nolan's voice crying out, "Daddy, where are you?" "I'm right here, buddy," I'd whisper, reaching out for him, settling him back to sleep. Then I'd look at Erica, her chest rising and falling, tubes everywhere, and I'd take her hand again, quietly telling myself, I have to keep going. For them. For Erica. The hospital days dragged on endlessly. Logan and Nolan, somehow, began to adapt. The waiting room became their new world. Logan colored with crayons on sheets of printer paper, creating bright, bold superheroes to give to Erica. "Daddy, do you think she likes the drawings?" he asked me once. "She loves them," I said, voice cracking. "You make her smile." Nolan clutched his dinosaur, making up stories. He says he's the doctor now. He can help Erica feel better. I tried to laugh. I really did. But Erica, she was growing weaker. Her voice softer. Her appetite smaller. I kept fighting, doing what I could. Feeding her ice chips. Reading her stories. Smiling when all I wanted to do was scream. I balanced on the edge of collapse, juggling the kids, the work, the fear that wouldn't leave my chest. I typed freelance articles in the corner while listening for the monitor beeps that tracked my daughter's life. Eventually, in a moment of desperation I already knew was pointless, I called Camille. "Camille," I said quietly, "Erica needs you. Please. She's very weak. Can you visit her? Even just once." She sighed. "Harvey, I can't come back. I have my own life now. You'll manage." And then the call ended. That familiar, hollow beep. I stared at the phone, not sure whether to throw it or cry. I called my parents, one last time. "We'll come back after our trip, Harvey," my mother said. "Hang in there, son. Hang in there." The words felt like a joke. A cruel one. I sat there in the hallway, my body heavy, my head bowed, feeling like someone had driven a knife through my chest and left it there. There was no one. Not a single family member. Just me. Just me and the kids. Erica, pale and quiet in her bed. Logan drawing his superheroes. Nolan talking to his dinosaur. All of us cramped in that hospital room reeking of antiseptic. Ariana, the young nurse assigned to Erica's care, was the only flicker of light in those unrelenting days. She had soft brown hair, always tied back in a high ponytail, eyes that were kind and calm, and a way of speaking that made even the worst moments seem less suffocating. Every time she came into the room to check Erica's IV or monitor her heart rate, she'd greet Logan and Nolan with a warm smile, sometimes slipping them small candies. "Your kids are adorable, Harvey," she said one evening, her voice light as she watched Nolan doze off with his plastic dinosaur tucked under his chin. "You're an amazing father." I gave her a tired, broken smile and shook my head. "I'm not so sure about that, Ariana. I'm just trying to keep everything from falling apart." She didn't argue, just looked at me with that quiet understanding I had come to rely on more than I'd admit. Then came the morning that split time in half before and after. After nearly 3 weeks of Erica's hospitalization, Dr. Carter, a man in his 50s with tired eyes behind thick glasses, asked to speak with me in private. I followed him down the corridor, my legs heavy, dread already swirling in my gut. He led me into a small consultation room, the overhead lights too bright, the air sterile and cold. I sat down slowly on the hard plastic chair, my palms clenched so tightly that I felt my nails digging into the skin. Dr. Carter sat across from me, folding his hands on the clipboard before speaking. "Harvey," he began cautiously, his voice grave. "We have the results of the in-depth tests." My stomach twisted. I couldn't breathe. "Erica has acute myeloid leukemia. AML," he said. I froze. The word leukemia landed like a hammer to the chest. Then he said it. "It's a very serious form of blood cancer." My throat closed. My ears started ringing. I was sure I'd misheard him. How serious?" I asked, my voice cracking under the pressure. Dr. Carter sighed and looked down at his papers briefly before meeting my eyes again. The prognosis for AML in children isn't good, Harvey. We'll begin chemotherapy immediately, but I need you to prepare yourself. The survival rate is not high. I don't remember how I left the doctor's office. I don't even recall standing. Somehow, I was in the hallway again, my back pressed against the cold wall, hands on my head, trying not to scream. Erica, my little girl, 8 years old. She used to race across the playground, talk to me about her dreams of flying dragons and building tree houses. And now she was fighting something I couldn't even wrap my head around. I wanted to scream, to punch the walls, to call Camille and curse her for abandoning us, to yell at my parents for their absence, to curse the universe for its cruelty. But I didn't. Instead, I wiped my face, forced my legs to move, and walked back into that hospital room. I smiled for Erica. I told her everything was going to be okay. The days that followed blurred together. Erica began chemotherapy. I watched helplessly as her beautiful hair fell out in clumps. Her face grew thinner, her skin ghost pale. She still tried to talk, always asking about Logan and Nolan, smiling faintly when I read her the same fairy tales she used to act out in the living room. But I could see the light in her eyes dimming, like a candle fighting the wind. Logan and Nolan, young as they were, felt the change. Logan stopped drawing superheroes. His drawings now showed a girl in a bed, flowers all around her, the sky always gray. Nolan kept tugging at my sleeve. "When will Erica come home to play with me, Daddy?" he'd ask. My throat would close every time. "Soon, buddy," I'd whisper. "Soon." And through all of it, Ariana was there. More than just a nurse. She was steady when everything else was crumbling. She didn't just adjust IVs and mark charts. She brought calm into the room. Warmth. She offered small comforts in the midst of chaos. One afternoon, as I sat beside Erica, too tired to even keep my head up, Ariana walked in and set a hot cup of coffee on the side table. "You need to rest, Harvey," she said, her voice firm but kind. "I know you're strong, but you're human too." I stared at her, wanting to say thank you, but the lump in my throat was too big to speak around. So I just nodded, wrapped my fingers around the warm cup, and held on. That night, after Logan and Nolan had finally fallen asleep on the chairs, their little bodies curled up and wrapped in jackets, Ariana came and sat down beside me. "Do you want to talk?" she asked softly. I shook my head at first, but then something cracked. And like a dam finally breaking after holding back a flood, I started to speak about Camille. How she left. That's how I started. I told Ariana everything about Camille, how she had walked away as if we were just a page she was done reading. How she never looked back, not even when Erica was diagnosed. I told her about my parents, how they were always traveling, always somewhere far enough that caring was optional, how they never visited their grandkids. Not once. And then I talked about the fear, the paralyzing fear of losing Erica. The nights I stayed awake watching her chest rise and fall, afraid that one moment it just wouldn't. The fear of not being strong enough to hold all 3 of my children up while my world collapsed. Ariana sat beside me quietly, listening. She didn't interrupt, didn't shift uncomfortably, or look at the clock. Just stayed. At one point, she placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "I lost my brother to illness," she said softly when I paused, trying to breathe through the weight of my own words. "I know that feeling of helplessness, but you're not alone, Harvey. I'm here. And Erica, Logan, Nolan, they need you more than ever." Her voice was like a cool breeze in a storm, comforting, but not enough to lift the ache. Nothing could. The pain had taken root inside me, deep and raw. A week later, Erica's condition took a sharp turn. The chemo wasn't working. At least, not like we'd hoped. The doctors had explained that the cancer was aggressive, but I hadn't expected it to feel like she was slipping through my fingers so fast. She had constant high fevers. Her appetite vanished. She cried at night, curled in pain, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. I stayed by her bed, holding her hand through every tremor, singing the lullabies I used to hum when she was a baby, my voice cracking with every line. "Daddy, I'm so tired," she whispered one night, her eyes barely opening. "I want to go home." My heart shattered. I leaned down, kissed her burning forehead, and whispered, "I'll take you home, princess. I promise." But I lied. I couldn't keep that promise. A few days later, Erica passed away. I was reading to her like always. A story about a brave princess and a dragon with golden wings. I remember thinking her breathing had slowed. Then the monitor began to beat fast, frantic, urgent. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Carter appeared. But I already knew. I felt it. Erica was gone. I pulled her into my arms. She was weightless, still, no longer warm. "Erica, don't go," I whispered, my voice splintering. "Please don't leave, Daddy." But there was no answer. There would never be an answer again. The world collapsed around me. I don't know how long I sat there, crying, shaking, the sound of my sobs swallowed by the hum of machines. I only remember Logan and Nolan waking up in the chaos, running to me. Logan wrapped his arms around my side, his voice choked. "Where's Erica, Daddy?" Nolan, his innocent eyes searching mine, just took my hand. "Don't cry, Daddy." But I couldn't stop. I had lost Erica, my brightest light, the one who dreamed of dragons, who held this little broken family together even while she faded. I failed her. I failed Logan and Nolan. I failed myself. Ariana was there. She didn't say much, just stood behind me with her hand on my shoulder, a quiet anchor in a sea of despair. Later, when I could barely move, she helped care for Logan and Nolan, took them outside for a little air, for some kind of normalcy, while I stayed behind with Erica. Saying goodbye. When I finally stepped out of the room, holding the tiny pink sweater Erica used to wear, the one with the missing button and the dragon patch sewn on the sleeve, Ariana approached me. She handed me a glass of water, her voice low, steady. "Harvey," she said, "I know it feels like you can't go on, but Logan and Nolan are still here. They need you. And Erica, she would want you to keep going." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. But deep down, somewhere beneath the crushing grief, I knew she was right. My boys needed me. I couldn't fall apart now. I wiped my face, took a breath that felt like a weight, and walked out to the waiting room. My son sat there, eyes wide and waiting. "We'll be okay," I said, kneeling to pull them into my arms. I didn't believe it, not yet. But I had to say it. I had to try. For them. For Erica. The days that followed were a dark void. I moved through them as if underwater, arranging Erica's funeral with a numb detachment. It was a simple service, held in the small church in Willow Creek. Just me, Logan, Nolan, and a few kind neighbors who came to pay their respects. Camille didn't show up. She didn't call. Didn't ask how the boys were doing. Just a short, cold text. "I'm so sorry, Harvey." That was it. My parents made it to the funeral after their trip, dressed in black, solemn-faced, their voices soft with regret. But by then, none of it mattered. Their absence when it counted most had left a mark I couldn't ignore. I couldn't even bring myself to look at them for long. I stood by Erica's small white coffin, my hands trembling as I looked down at her peaceful face. She looked like she was sleeping, so still, so quiet, so wrong. The only thing that felt real was the pain clawing through my chest. I remember thinking, how do I live without her? The days that followed felt like walking through smoke. Everything around me moved, but I didn't feel connected to it. I went through the motions, feeding the boys, answering emails, folding laundry, but inside, I was gone. I was no longer Harvey. Just a hollow shell held together by routine and the thin thread of duty. Every morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at a stranger. Red-rimmed eyes, deep, dark circles, skin that clung to the bones of a face that had aged 10 years in weeks. My reflection mocked me, this man who once believed he could protect his children from anything. But I couldn't save Erica. I had lost my 8-year-old daughter, the girl who believed in dragons, the girl who believed in me. Some nights, I'd walk quietly into her room and just stand there. The bunk bed still sat in the corner, the top covered in that same flower-patterned blanket she loved. I never touched it. I couldn't. It was a shrine, now a monument to all that was lost. Just looking at it made my knees buckle, but I kept coming back, like a punishment I needed to endure. Logan and Nolan still needed me. That was the only thing that kept me from falling completely. But I won't lie, there were nights I thought about giving up entirely. One evening, after I'd tucked the boys in, I wandered into the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. An old bottle of sleeping pills stared back at me. I held it in my hands for what felt like hours, turning it over, shaking it slightly, listening to the faint rattle inside. I walked to the living room and sat on the couch, the bottle resting in my palm. I stared at those small, smooth, white pills, wondering if they could take me somewhere, anywhere, without pain, without bills, without failure. I imagined lying down, just closing my eyes, letting it all fade. And then I heard a soft voice. "Daddy," Nolan, talking in his sleep. And then another image hit me like a freight train, Logan's wide eyes the morning after Erica passed, looking up at me, asking, "Why can't Erica come back, Daddy?" My grip on the bottle loosened. I couldn't do it. I couldn't let them lose someone else. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, unscrewed the cap, and dumped the pills into the trash. The clatter as they hit the empty can sounded louder than thunder. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. For Erica. For myself. For the 2 boys sleeping in the next room who still believed I could keep them safe. "You have to live, Harvey," I whispered to myself, choking on the words. For them. The apartment was different now. Hollow. Too quiet. No stories from Erica about school. No giggles echoing down the hallway as she played with Logan and Nolan. That silence was the worst part. Logan grew quieter. He stopped drawing superheroes. No more bright capes and happy stick figure families. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table for hours with a stack of printer paper and a box of colored pencils, carefully sketching flowers. Over and over. Soft, delicate petals, always in shades of pink and purple. One evening, he showed me a drawing and said, "It's like Erica's blanket, so she can see them, Daddy." His voice was so soft I could barely hear it. I pulled him into my arms, held him tightly, and whispered, "She'll love them, buddy." I tried to keep my voice steady, tried not to let him see my tears. Nolan, being so young, didn't understand. Not really. Every night, he curled up in my lap with his plastic dinosaur tucked under one arm and looked up at me with those big eyes. "Where's Erica, Daddy? When's she coming back?" I never knew what to say, so I kissed his forehead and said the only thing I could. "She's in the sky, sweetheart. She's watching us." He always smiled at that. "I'll wave at her tomorrow," he said once. "So she knows I miss her." I tried to give them a sense of normal. I really did. Every morning, I took them to preschool, made them simple meals, mostly pasta or deli sandwiches. At night, I read them bedtime stories, my voice soft and strained, the pages blurring sometimes when my eyes filled with tears. Every action felt heavy, like dragging a boulder up a hill. One step at a time, I took on more freelance writing jobs, typing late into the night on my old, battered laptop. Articles with no heart, 10 budgeting tips for families, or how to plan the perfect birthday party. Empty words that paid the bills. But whenever I opened the file for my novel, From Ashes, I just sat there, staring at the screen, unable to write a single word. How could I write about finding meaning in life when I felt like all meaning had vanished? I stared at that blinking cursor night after night, the blank screen reflecting the emptiness inside me. Everything I had to say felt too raw, too broken to shape into anything coherent. And even if I did manage to write, who would care? Who would want to read the story of a man who couldn't save his daughter? It was Ariana who slowly began pulling me out of that mire, though I doubt she ever realized how vital she was. One afternoon, just as the boys were finishing their naps, there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it to see her standing there with a small white box in her hands and a gentle smile on her face. "I thought the kids might like these," she said. "Cookies?" I asked, surprised. She nodded. "Homemade. Oatmeal raisin and chocolate chip. I had a free afternoon." I stood there stunned for a moment, blinking like the light was too bright. I hadn't expected anyone, especially not her. But before I could say anything else, Logan and Nolan rushed past me with excited cheers. "Ariana," they shouted in unison, wrapping their arms around her legs. She knelt down to hug them, laughing softly. For that moment, just that moment, our dim little apartment seemed to brighten. Ariana didn't just drop off the cookies and go. She stayed. She sat cross-legged on the floor with Nolan, letting him show her all his plastic dinosaurs, and helped Logan finish a puzzle he'd started earlier in the week. She talked to them with a kindness that was never forced, never patronizing. It was genuine. Later, as we sat at the table while the boys drew in the corner, she looked at me. "How are you holding up, Harvey?" she asked quietly, her eyes warm with concern. I wanted to lie to say I was fine, that I was managing. But looking at her, really looking into those eyes, I couldn't. The dam cracked. I exhaled, long and slow. "I don't know, Ariana. I don't know how to keep going." She didn't offer cheap sympathy. She didn't rattle off hollow reassurances. Instead, she nodded and sat back in her chair. "When I was 13, I lost my younger brother," she said after a pause. "Heart disease. He was only 9. There were days I thought I'd never get through it." She glanced over at Logan and Nolan, her expression distant but calm. But then I realized something. Living on was the only way to keep his memory alive. Her words washed over me like a soft breeze. Not enough to erase the pain, but just enough to remind me I wasn't entirely alone in it. That night, after Logan and Nolan had drifted off to sleep, Nolan curled under his dinosaur blanket, Logan clutching his flower drawings, I opened my laptop and clicked on the file I hadn't touched in months, From Ashes. I didn't open it to write. I just wanted to read the old pages, to remember what it felt like when I still believed I had something worth saying. But as the old lines scrolled before me, something shifted. It was like a door in my heart creaked open, letting in a breeze I hadn't felt in ages. My fingers began to move. I didn't think. I just typed. I wrote about Erica, her smile, her dragon dreams, the way she held my hand in the hospital. I wrote about Camille, her betrayal, the moment she walked away from our children. I wrote about my parents, how they chose their European vacation over saying goodbye to their dying granddaughter. And I wrote about me, a broken, struggling man trying to keep breathing, a father clinging to 2 boys while the world crumbled around him, a dreamer with nothing left but a thread of hope. The words poured out like a river, fierce and wild, carrying pain and love all at once. I wrote every night once the apartment fell silent, and the only sounds were the tapping of keys and the quiet, steady breathing of Logan and Nolan from the other room. I didn't care if it was good. I didn't know if it was publishable. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Each page kept Erica alive. Each paragraph helped me face the pain. And each sentence reminded me I still had two boys who needed their father. Ariana visited more often. She brought more cookies, storybooks for the kids, or sometimes just herself. She played with Nolan, helped Logan draw, and talked to me like I wasn't broken. One day, I mentioned the writing to her. "I've been working on the book again," I said hesitantly, not even looking up from the mug I was holding. She smiled. "You should finish it, Harvey. I believe it'll touch people." I let out a weak laugh. "It's just the ramblings of a failed single dad." Her hand touched mine, steady and warm. "No, Harvey. It's the story of a loving father who didn't give up even when everything was against him. That's a story worth telling." Her words lit something in me. Not a fire. Not yet. But a flicker. I started spending more time on the book. Late hours, quiet nights. And I wrote about the hospital days. About Erica's tired eyes. And the way she looked at me one night and whispered, "I'm so tired." I wrote about Logan drawing flowers for his sister. About the way he carefully chose the colors, always purple and pink, Erica's favorites, and how he'd placed the paper gently beside her empty bed, as if hoping she might still see them. I wrote about Nolan, too, how he clutched his little green dinosaur at night and curled up in my lap until he drifted off to sleep. How his small body rising and falling with every breath kept me grounded in moments I thought I'd float away in grief. I wrote about the loneliness that settled in my bones, the kind that no phone call or distant thinking of you card could cure. I wrote about the hollow feeling of abandonment, of parents who didn't care enough to be there, of a woman who used to be my wife, but couldn't even show up to bury her child. I wrote about the nights I sat alone in the dark, staring at those sleeping pills, thinking maybe the pain could finally stop. But I also wrote about the moments that kept me from slipping over the edge: Logan's crooked smile, Nolan's infectious giggles, Ariana's warm voice and steady presence. Those small mercies became my lifeline. Life didn't magically improve. Bills piled up like snow against a shut door. The landlord kept slipping notices under the door, reminders in big red letters. I had no choice but to keep churning out freelance articles to make ends meet. I wrote about budgeting for families, about hosting birthday parties on a budget, about ways to save on groceries, ironic, considering I often skipped meals so the boys had enough. But my book, From Ashes, that was different. That was mine. That was where I remembered who I was. And slowly, so slowly, Logan and Nolan began to find small joys again. Logan started drawing superheroes, just like he used to. Only now, I noticed that sometimes, in the corner of the page, he'd draw a single flower. For Erica, he'd say softly. Nolan, with all the chaotic energy of a 3-year-old, pulled me into his world of dinosaurs and pillow forts. He'd wrap himself in blankets and roar at me, demanding I be the tiny, scared daddy man. I'd laugh, even when the laughter felt jagged in my throat. One evening, Ariana showed up holding a small birthday cake. "Whose birthday is it?" I asked, frowning in confusion. "No one's," she said, smiling. "I just thought today deserved to be a happy day." Logan and Nolan lit up, racing toward the kitchen and jumping up and down as she set the cake down. They fought over who got to blow out the candles, eventually deciding to do it together. Their laughter rang through the apartment, high, clear, real. I looked at Ariana, my chest tightening with something I hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. "Thank you, Ariana," I said quietly. "You don't know how much this means to us." Her smile softened, and she reached out to brush a crumb off the table. "I just want to see you and the kids smile, Harvey. You deserve it." She wasn't just a kind nurse anymore. Ariana had become something more. A friend. A light. Someone who didn't try to fix me, but simply stood by me, letting me stumble forward at my own pace. And somehow, that made all the difference. She was like a lantern guiding me through the darkness. I wasn't healed. Not even close. But I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The long nights continued. After the boys went to bed and the dishes were done, I opened my laptop and returned to the manuscript. I wrote more about Erica, about her quiet strength and fiery spirit, about Logan's resilience and Nolan's innocence. I wrote about Ariana's unexpected friendship. I wrote about a man who thought he would break, but stood up again for love, for memory, for family. 6 months after Erica's death, I finished the manuscript. I titled it From Ashes. The night I completed the final sentence, I sat still for a long time, just staring at the screen. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just felt something close to peace. I sent it out, unsure anyone would care. Then, one morning, while I sat at the kitchen table nursing a watery coffee and listening to Logan and Nolan argue over the last cookie, I got an email. Subject: offer to publish from ashes. I blinked. My fingers trembled as I clicked it open. Dear Mr. Harvey, we were deeply moved by your raw and heartfelt story. We believe this book has the potential to touch the hearts of many readers. I read the message again and again, half convinced it was a mistake. After so many rejection letters, someone saw worth in what I'd written. The publishing process moved faster than I ever imagined. I was paired with an editor named Sarah, a woman in her 50s with a gentle, clipped tone and a sharp sense of story. She didn't try to rewrite my pain. She helped shape it, guide it, strengthen it. On one of our many calls, she paused and said, "This isn't just your story, Harvey. It's the story of anyone who's lost someone they love, who thought they couldn't go on." She let the silence hang for a moment, then added, "But stood up again." I nodded, though Sarah couldn't see it over the phone, my throat tight with something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. A small flicker, delicate and unfamiliar, but real. For the first time in years, I wasn't ashamed of who I was or what I had to offer the world. From Ashes was published on a rainy October day. The sky was gray, the streets slick and empty, and I remember holding the first printed copy in my hands, standing by the window while Logan and Nolan played with building blocks behind me. I didn't expect much. I hoped to sell a few hundred copies, maybe enough to pay off some debts, maybe buy the boys something nice, new toys or winter coats that didn't come from a thrift store bin. But then, like a tidal wave, the book began to spread. A local paper ran a piece, a love letter to fathers, mothers, and broken hearts. A popular blogger shared my story, a single father finding light in the shadow of loss, and within days, From Ashes climbed bestseller list. I watched the numbers update in real time, stunned, bewildered, and then the email started. Dozens, then hundreds. Messages from fathers who had lost children, from single mothers, from people drowning in grief, from those who'd nearly given up. They told me, "Your story made me feel less alone." Each letter felt like a brick rebuilding a part of me I didn't know could be restored. I read them late at night, curled on the couch after the boys had gone to bed, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, sometimes both. Then came the interviews. A local TV station invited me to their studio. I sat beneath hot, blinding lights in a too-tight jacket, stumbling over stories of Erica, Logan, Nolan, and the nights I thought I wouldn't make it through. "What kept you writing?" the host asked, his eyes curious but kind. I took a slow breath, thinking of Erica, her bright eyes, the way she'd slip her hand into mine at the hospital. "My kids," I said. "Erica taught me how to love. Logan and Nolan, they taught me how to live." I wrote to keep my promise to them that I wouldn't give up. From an unknown writer sitting in a cramped apartment, I suddenly became a name people recognized. Invitations came pouring in from local libraries, grief support groups, mental health workshops. Eventually, larger events in cities I'd only seen in movies. I stood before rooms filled with strangers, sharing my journey not as a polished author or motivational speaker, but as a father. A man who had faced unimaginable loss. A man who found his way through pain, one page at a time. Each time I spoke, I felt Erica there. Not in the room exactly, but somewhere close, smiling, maybe even proud. Her presence was like the wind at my back, invisible but strong. And then the royalties came in. Not a fortune, but enough. I paid off our overdue rent. Bought real groceries, fresh fruit, vegetables, even Logan's favorite cereal without checking the price. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch when the electricity bill arrived. But the biggest change came the day I found the house. I knew I had to leave the apartment. As much as I loved it for the memories, every corner, every shadow, reminded me of Erica. The hallway where she used to sing. The kitchen where she begged to lick cake batter. Her empty room, still untouched. I found a small house on the outskirts of Willow Creek. Nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a small yard, but it was clean, quiet, and full of sunlight. I signed the lease with shaking hands. On moving day, Logan ran through the house whooping, his voice echoing down the narrow hallways. "Daddy, I have my own room," he shouted, grinning from ear to ear. Nolan clutched his ever-present dinosaur, bouncing up and down on the grass outside. He laughed so hard he fell backwards, giggling uncontrollably. I stood there watching them, tears prickling behind my eyes. For the first time, I felt like I was giving them something real. A home. A place where life could start again. But the pain of losing Erica, it never left. Each night, after Logan and Nolan were asleep in their new rooms, I sat alone in the living room, the curtains open, staring out at the dark backyard. I thought of her voice, her tiny hands holding mine in the hospital, the way she used to call Daddy whenever she needed me. Some nights I cried. Not from weakness, but because I knew that grief would always live beside me, like a shadow. Quiet, constant, familiar. But I also knew I had to live. Not just for Logan and Nolan, but for Erica. for what she taught me about love, about strength, about holding on. Ariana remained constant in our lives, like a star that never dimmed. She came to the new house bearing gifts, books for the boys, fresh cookies, and a small potted plant she placed carefully near the garden. To brighten the yard, she said, smiling. Logan beamed. Superhero, Ariana, he yelled, wrapping his arms around her. Nolan squealed, clinging to her leg. Tell me a dinosaur story. She laughed, crouching down. Only if you help me water the plant. Watching her there, surrounded by my boys, something shifted in me. Ariana wasn't just the nurse who stood beside me in the hospital that awful night. She wasn't just the kind woman who showed up with cookies and calm words. She was the person who helped me see that life was still worth living. One evening, as we sat on the porch, the late sun dipping low over Willow Creek, the sky bathed in gold, I watched Logan and Nolan chase each other across the grass barefoot, laughing, tangled in childhood joy. Ariana sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence without even touching her. Then she reached for my hand. You've done something amazing, Harvey, she said softly. I turned to her, surprised. Not because of the book, she added, but because you didn't give up. Her words settled in the quiet air between us. I didn't know what to say, so I simply squeezed her hand gently. No reply came from my mouth, but I think she knew I was still standing because of her, too. A few weeks later, I found myself walking hesitantly into a small room at the Willow Creek Community Center. The sign on the door read, Parents in Grief. It was the first time I'd ever considered attending something like this. I felt awkward, out of place, unsure if I belonged. But I sat down, and I listened. A father shared the story of losing his teenage son in a car crash. A mother spoke of her baby girl who died from leukemia. Their pain was raw and familiar, and in their words I found pieces of myself. When it was my turn, I spoke of Erica, her dragon dreams, the way she used to call me daddy when she needed reassurance. I told them I'd almost given up, that I couldn't see a way forward for a long time. There were nods, tears, understanding. An older woman beside me reached out and took my hand. Her skin was papery and warm. You're a strong father, she said quietly. She must be so proud of you. For the first time, I didn't feel like a writer, or a speaker, or even a man trying to get by. I felt like a father, one who loved, one who had lost, and one who was learning how to live with that loss. The group became a rhythm in my week. I kept going, not just to talk, but to listen, to learn how others turned pain into purpose. One man, Tom, shared that he'd planted a garden for his son, a space to remember, to heal. It stayed with me. One weekend, I told Logan and Nolan, we're going to plant a rose bush. What? Logan asked, curious, already tugging on his little gardening gloves. Because it was Erica's favorite, I said, and I want her to have a place in our new home. They nodded, no more questions, just silent agreement. We dug the earth together. Nolan got mud on his face and giggled. Logan took care with the roots. When we finished, I stood back and looked at the small bush, imagining what it would look like in full bloom. And when the first rose finally bloomed vivid red against green, the first felt Erica, right there in the petals. Life still wasn't perfect. I still woke up some mornings with a weight in my chest. Some nights I heard Erica's voice in dreams and had to steady myself before stepping out of bed. Logan still drew flowers in the corners of his sketches. Nolan asked fewer questions, but they never stopped completely. We weren't trying to forget Erica. We were learning how to live with her always near, carried inside us. I kept writing not just for From Ashes, but because writing became the way I navigated the world. My pen was my compass, my therapy, my connection to her. To them. One evening, as I was editing a speech for an upcoming event, Logan tiptoed into the room, holding something behind his back. Daddy, I made this for you, he said, his voice quiet but proud. He handed me a sheet of paper. In his drawing, I stood between him and Nolan, and beside us was a small girl, drawn with careful wings, floating on a cloud, smiling. That's Erica, he said shyly. I think she's happy. I didn't speak. I just hugged him, the drawing crinkling between us, tears falling freely. She is happy, son, I whispered. And Daddy's going to try to be happy too. For you and Nolan. A few days later, Ariana came by with a tray of freshly baked cookies, still warm. Logan ran to show her the drawing. She studied it and smiled. He's got talent, Harvey, she said. Like his dad. I laughed, and for the first time in so long, it felt light. Real. Unburdened. Thank you, Ariana, I said, my voice full of everything I didn't know how to put into words. For everything. She didn't respond. She just reached for my hand again and held it. In that quiet moment, with Logan and Nolan playing in the other room, and the scent of cookies in the air, I realized something. We weren't building a new life to replace Erica. We were building one to keep going with her always in our hearts. A year after From Ashes was published, My life had changed in ways I never dared to dream. The little house outside Willow Creek wasn't just a roof over our heads, it was a home. Ours. Mine, Logan's, and Nolan's. The backyard bloomed with roses, bright and defiant. Erica's flower. And each morning, as sunlight streamed through our kitchen windows and laughter echoed in the halls, I felt a flicker of peace creeping back into my heart. But the pain of losing Erica, that would always remain. A scar. One that would never fully heal. I learned to live with it like learning to breathe in a room with too little air. You get used to the weight in your chest, the way sorrow lingers just beneath the surface. But sometimes, in the stillness of night, I still heard her voice, Erica, calling out, "Daddy," soft and distant in my dreams. The success of From Ashes brought opportunities one never imagined. Invitations arrived from across the country, speaking engagements, interviews, workshops. I found myself on stages in cities like Chicago and Boston, looking out at packed auditoriums. And each time I spoke of Erica, of Logan and Nolan, of grief and the edge I nearly fell from, I wasn't just telling my story. I was keeping Erica alive. In my heart. In theirs. And I wrote. The second book came slowly, with more hesitation. It was about forgiveness and healing, though I wasn't certain I'd truly forgiven anyone. Not yet. Some wounds still stung too deeply. Some voices still echoed too cold. Then, one afternoon, the past came knocking. I was sitting at the table with Logan, helping him solve a tricky multiplication problem, his brow furrowed, pencil tapping against his cheek, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. My mother's number. I froze. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, thumb hovering. Then I exhaled and pressed answer. Harvey. Her voice came through softer than I remembered. Fragile. It's Mom. I didn't speak. We read your book, she said, and I heard a tremble in her words. Your father and I, we didn't realize. We want to see you. And Logan. And Nolan. We regret not being there when you needed us. I sat in silence, my eyes on Logan, who was still focused on his worksheet. My chest felt tight. I remembered the hospital room. The countless nights. Erica hooked up to IVs. Me holding her hand, praying she wouldn't be afraid. And the calls I made, please come. I had begged them. Even for a day. And they had said, we're traveling. A cruise. Like some vacation mattered more than their dying granddaughter. I closed my eyes for a moment. Thank you for calling. I said finally, my voice calm but firm. But I'm not sure I'm ready for you to come back into our lives. Harvey, she began, her voice breaking. Logan and Nolan. I continued, they need people who are there when it counts. She started crying, then soft, broken sobs through the line. We were wrong, she said. I was wrong. We want to make things right. I sat quietly, the hurt still lodged in places words couldn't reach. But I also knew that part of healing was setting boundaries. You can visit, I said at last. But short visits. I'll be there the whole time. No sleepovers. No surprises. When they came, a week later, they looked older. Smaller somehow. Their eyes heavy with regret. They brought toys and awkward smiles. Logan was polite. Nolan clung to my leg. And I watched everything, every word, every gesture. I didn't open my heart. Not out of resentment. But because I had to protect my children and myself from wounds that might never fully close. The biggest surprise came one night, as I was reading Nolan a bedtime story. His head was resting on my shoulder, his dinosaur tucked beneath his arm. The phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and felt a jolt. Camille. The number was still saved, though I hadn't seen it flash on my screen in years. My thumb trembled as I answered. Harvey. Her voice was soft, almost artificial, strangely sweet, as if she were trying to remember how to sound like the wife she once was. I read your book. I said nothing, heart hammering in my chest. It's incredible, she said. Really. I regret leaving. I want to come back. Start over. Be a family again. I stood frozen in the hallway, the lights dimmed, the warmth of Nolan still against me. I want to be there, she went on. For Logan and Nolan. For you. I've changed. Please. Images flickered in my mind, her walking out. Her silence during the hospital stays. Her absence when Erica died. The text I received. I'm so sorry. A breath. Camille. I said slowly. You abandoned our kids when they needed you most. You weren't there when Erica was sick. When Logan and Nolan cried for their mom. When I begged you to come. I know, she whispered. I know. I made a mistake. But I regret it every day. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry, I said. But there's no place for you here anymore. Silence. I've changed, Harvey, she said, her voice cracking. I want to make it right. I looked at Nolan, his eyes beginning to close. And then I ended the call. Not out of anger. Not even out of hate. But because something inside me had shifted. I felt a release. A quiet, steady relief. Like I'd finally set down a burden I'd carried too long. I looked at Logan and Nolan playing on the floor, their laughter echoing through the living room, and I knew deep in my bones I'd made the right choice. We didn't need Camille. We had each other, and that was enough. While people from my past tried to re-enter, Ariana was the one who stayed. Quietly, steadfastly. She never asked for anything in return. She brought cookies, spent afternoons helping the boys with their puzzles and dinosaur forts, and really listened when I talked about Erica. No judgment. No advice I didn't ask for. Just presence. One evening, as we sat on the porch under a faint moonlight, the boys asleep inside, I found myself speaking words I hadn't planned. "You've done more than you know," I said, my voice low. "You helped me see that life is still worth living, even when it hurts." She looked over at me and smiled, placing her hand gently on mine. "Harvey, you're stronger than you think," she said. "I'm just here to remind you of that." I sat in that silence for a long time, her hand warm in mine. That was the moment I realized I was falling in love with Ariana. Not the overwhelming, fiery kind of love I'd once believed was the only kind worth chasing. No, this was steadier, deeper, a kind of love built on kindness, on late-night talks, on helping Logan find his missing sock, on remembering Erica without having to apologize for it. Ariana never tried to replace Erica. She never once tried to fill the void she left. Instead, she brought a new warmth into our home, a quiet strength, a gentle hand when the boys woke from nightmares or when I found myself lost in memories. Once, after a long day, I asked if she'd stay for dinner. She laughed. "Only if you promise not to make pasta again." I laughed too, the sound surprising me with how light it felt. Not weighed down by guilt or sorrow. Just light. A year after From Ashes was released, my life had changed in more ways than I could count. I wasn't a celebrity, not in the traditional sense, but I had become a symbol. Not for success, but for resilience. I continued speaking at workshops not just about writing, but about surviving loss, about holding on when the world tries to break you. I hosted sessions at the support group Now, listening to other parents talk about their children, their grief, their healing. And I shared too. I talked about Erica, how she taught me to love, how Logan and Nolan gave me a reason to keep going. Each time I shared, I felt like I was doing more than just helping others. I was stitching myself back together. Logan grew day by day. One afternoon, while we were walking back from soccer practice, he looked up at me, his brow furrowed. "Daddy," he asked, "does Erica see me when I play soccer?" I stopped, knelt beside him, and pulled him close. "She's always watching you, Logan," I whispered. "She's up in the sky, cheering for you." His eyes lit up. "You think she liked my goal today?" "I think she loved it," I said, hugging him tighter. Nolan, now 4, still clutched his plastic dinosaur wherever he went. But he had started telling stories his own. Stories of Erica flying on clouds, or racing with dragons. I listened to each one, smiling, locking every detail deep in my heart, like a precious gem I never wanted to lose. Ariana became part of our rhythm, inseparable from the life we were rebuilding. One day, as we planted another rose bush in the backyard, she knelt beside the boys, showing them how to pat down the soil. "Do you think Erica would like this flower's color?" she asked, brushing her fingers over the pink petals. Nolan nodded eagerly. "It's the same color as her favorite dress." Logan gave a shy smile. "I think she'd like it too." I stood back for a moment, watching them all three, and felt something swell in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not long after, I asked Ariana to marry me. There was no big gesture. No ring hidden in a dessert. Just me, sitting beside her on the porch, the kids asleep, my voice steady. "Would you like to build a family with us?" She looked at me, eyes glistening, and smiled. "I'm already part of you, Harvey." We didn't erase the past. Erica was still there. In every rose that bloomed. In the corners of Logan's drawings. In every wild cloud-chasing story Nolan told. But we had learned to live with her memory not as a wound, but as part of our journey. I kept writing not for recognition, but for the people who wrote to me, telling me how my story helped them survive their own. I wrote about love, about loss, about what it meant to keep going when your heart felt shattered. And I lived for Logan, for Nolan, for Ariana, and for Erica, the little girl who taught me that even in brokenness, light could be found. One morning, I stood in the garden, watching Logan and Nolan running through the yard, their laughter echoing into the blue sky. Ariana stood beside me, her hand in mine. A breeze lifted the edge of her hair, sunlight dancing across her face. I looked up, my voice low. "Erica," I said, "I did it. Are you proud of me?" And in that moment, a gentle breeze passed over my shoulders, warm and soft, as if she were smiling from above. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.